Today is March 7th, 2015. Our little Jataka session, or not so little, in Toronto has ended yesterday, and we're back at Endless Path Zendo to return to our very wonderful sutra, the Vimalakirti Sutra, and we're at chapter 5 now, inquiring about the illness. At that time, the Buddha said to Manjushri, "You must go visit Vimalakirti and inquire about his illness." And just as a reminder, we're reading from the Burton Watson translation from the Chinese of Kumarajiva from around the 5th century or so. Manjushri replied to the Buddha, "World-honored one, that eminent man is very difficult to confront. He is profoundly enlightened in the true nature of reality and skilled at preaching the essentials of the Dharma. His eloquence never falters. His wisdom is free of impediments. He understands all the rules of bodhisattva conduct, and nothing in the secret storehouse of the Buddhas is beyond his grasp. He has overcome the host of maras and disports himself with transcendental powers. In wisdom and skillful means, he has mastered all there is to know. Nevertheless, in obedience to the Buddha's august command, I will go visit him and inquire about his illness." Of course, Manjushri is the bodhisattva of great prajna, transcendental wisdom. And it's all come down to him. Everybody else has begged off. But Manjushri can't refuse. He's wisdom itself. So the Buddha has cornered Manjushri, who sucks it in and heads off. Then the bodhisattvas and major disciples in the assembly, the Brahmas, Indras, and 4 heavenly kings, all thought to themselves, "Now, these 2 great men, Manjushri and Vimalakirti, will be talking together, and they will surely expound the wonderful Dharma." At that time, 8,000 bodhisattvas, 500 voice hearers, that is, those who just follow the teachings, but haven't yet found real freedom to live and embody the truth, as Zen points to, as Bodhidharma points to, beyond scriptures, beyond written texts, beyond any teachings that can be spoken in words, mind itself. And hundreds and thousands of heavenly beings all decided at once that they would like to accompany Manjushri on his visit. It's like saying, there's going to be an interesting story about to happen. I want to be a fly on the wall for that. So they all decide they'll go along. Manjushri, with this throng of bodhisattvas, major disciples, and heavenly beings reverently surrounding and accompanying him, proceeded to enter the city of Vaisali. At that time, the rich man, Vimalakirti, thought to himself, "Now, Manjushri is coming with that great assembly." At once, he employed his supernatural powers to empty the room, clearing it of all contents, and his attendants, leaving only a single bed on which he lay in sickness. It's not a negligible point that the sutra makes. Vimalakirti emptied the room. The room was empty. Every room is empty. And yet, there's someone there, lying on his or her sickbed all the time. It's a very interesting metaphor. Very accurate metaphor. When Manjushri entered the house, he saw that the room was bare of contents, that is, empty. And just one bed, with one bed, Vimalakirti lying alone on it. Vimalakirti said, "Welcome, Manjushri. You come without the marks of coming. You see me without the marks of seeing me." So Vimalakirti from his sickbed opens a dialogue on non-duality. He doesn't mess around. Right from the start, he's presented a challenge to Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom himself, how can we come without signs of movement? How can we see without anyone seeing? He's opened up the gate of non-duality. Now, what's Manjushri going to respond with? Manjushri said, just so, layman, what has already come can hardly be coming. And what has already departed can hardly be departing. What do I mean? What comes has nowhere it comes from. How did I get here? Here I am, sitting in this room. I don't know how I got here. I don't know who I am sitting here. What comes has nowhere it comes from. What departs has nowhere it goes. And what is seen cannot be further seen. That is, we can't find anybody doing the seeing. This is how it is. But let's put that aside for the moment. Manjushri doesn't want to get stuck there either. Layman, he goes on, this illness of yours, can you endure it? Is the treatment perhaps not making it worse rather than better? The world-honored one, that is the Buddha, countless times has made solicitous inquiries about you. That is, the Buddha doesn't ignore the form side of things, so every room is empty. He still is concerned. How's Vimalakirti doing? He hasn't gone into some vast empty space, cold-hearted, kind of, what's it called, depersonalized. Big issue today, and mindfulness and other Buddhist things, about depersonal. No, warm-heartedness comes closer to the truth when we get out of the way. The Buddha shows that. So what is the cause of this illness? Has it been with you long? And how can it be cured? Isn't that the question? What is the cause of our illness? Have you had it for a long time? How can it be cured? What is this illness? The sutra will make it very clear. The illness we all have is the illness of duality. The illness of I'm in here, the center of everything. And everything else is out there. This is the illness that we suffer from. It separates us from moon, stars, clouds, snow, people we love, shopping, answering the phone. There's always somebody. Who is it? That's there. This illness. How did we get it? How can we be cured of it? There's a case in the Hekigan-roku, number 87. Medicine and sickness cure each other. Everything is medicine. What is the self? Everything is medicine for this sickness, if we can just see it. What is the self? Vimalakirti replied, this illness of mine is born of ignorance and feelings of attachment, because all living beings are sick. Therefore, I am sick. If all living beings are relieved of sickness, then my sickness will be mended. Why? Because the Bodhisattva, for the sake of living beings, enters the realm of birth and death, and because he is in the realm of birth and death, he suffers illness. If living beings can gain release from illness, then the Bodhisattva will no longer be ill. In fact, the bodhisattva would no longer have a need to be a bodhisattva. It's because all beings are sick that there are bodhisattvas. And the bodhisattva will be sick until all beings are healed. What is it to be healed? To wake up to our own nature, to know who and what we are. As Hakuin says, this very body, small, fragile, imperfect, is the body of Buddha. The banyan deer, if you remember that Jataka, will not leave until not just he's freed. He could leave. He could be freed, like in Arhat. He could go off. He's free. Or he won't leave until his people are freed. That is, all the deer. He refuses his freedom until all the deer are freed. But that's not enough. He refuses his freedom until the birds are freed too. But that's not enough. He refuses his own freedom until the fish too are freed. Only then will he accept the freedom that's already his. This is the mind of the bodhisattva. This is the mind of practice. It's not about separating ourselves from the world, or the situations, or the issues, or the problems, or the difficulties of our lives, but to find right in them the freedom that's always been there, the empty room that's always been there, and use that to be of benefit to others in the ordinary course of our lives. It's like the case of a rich man who has only one child, says Vimalakirti. If the child falls ill, then the father and mother too will be ill. But if the child's illness is cured, the father and mother too will be cured. As an aside, we know this also well. It may not be a child, it may be someone we're close with, someone having difficulties. We too are sick or hurting when someone we love is sick and hurting. In this Jataka session, is a friend I've known for the last 5 years. He's a young man. His daughter is now 9. When she was 5 years old, she was diagnosed with a killing cancer. She's gone for the last 5 years, or 4 years, through unspeakable surgeries, unspeakable chemotherapies, unspeakable medical practices. And she then, after one cancer disappeared, she gained a second cancer. And now she's in complete remission. She's had friends over to visit for a party last night. But he's been so distressed for the last 4 years. In the midst of his practice, though, he can be completely present, just with another person. He doesn't bring up his old story or his difficult story, but he's suffering, and it's always there. It's part of who he is. And it's really quite moving to see this and to interact with him. If the child's illness is cured, the father and mother too will be cured. The bodhisattva is like this, for he loves living beings, or she loves living beings as though they were his or her children. If living beings are sick, the bodhisattva will be sick. But if living beings are cured, the bodhisattva too will be cured. You ask what causes this illness what cause this illness arises from? The illness of the bodhisattva arises from great compassion. This is non-duality. This is the essence of non-duality. Yes, eternal, joyous, selfless, pure, as the Kanzeon Sutra of Timeless Life says, but it doesn't mean we won't suffer. It doesn't mean we won't feel the anguish of the world In fact, we might feel it more because there's no hiding from this is the reality of life on our planet at this time. The sickness that is the aspiration to help all beings, the pain that we feel when we open the internet and look at the newspaper, arises from great compassion. And so we practice to try and do something real about it, not just to fix ourselves. Though, unless you work on fixing yourself, you really can't do much for others. It's chicken and egg all the way. Manjushri said, "Layman, why is this room empty and without attendants?" Vimalakirti replied, "The lands of the Buddhas, too, are all empty." Yes, as Bodhidharma says in case 1 of Hekigonroku, the Blue Cliff Record, vast emptiness, nothing to be called holy. Nothing to be called holy. Vast emptiness. All the Buddha lands are empty. Not a thing. And yet, are the 10,000 things at the same time. So much of our Zen practice is to begin to see the identity of so-called absolute emptiness and relative, this speck of dust, this snowflake, this pain in my knee. No difference. It's the essence of our entire lifetime of practice. Why are they empty? Asked Manjushri. They are empty because of emptiness, Vimalakirti replied. And why is emptiness empty? Asked Manjushri. It is empty of distinctions. Therefore it is empty, was the reply. Distinctions are inner, outer, higher, lower, larger, smaller, better, not better, gooder, badder. All of the distinctions in which we chop up our minds and the world and our lives. In reality is empty of these things. But unless we know these things, we can't function. So how do we see them as the same? That's the essence of the question of our practice. And why is emptiness empty? Asked Manjushri. It is empty of distinctions. Therefore it's empty, was the reply. Can emptiness itself be the subject of distinctions? Asked Manjushri. A very good point, and something that we take up in many of the koans in our curriculum. What happens when you turn emptiness into a thing? Can emptiness itself be the subject of distinctions? It's a real trap. Many koans deal with what happens when you realize emptiness and then think you've got it. Ha, ha, ha. Distinctions, too, are empty, was the reply. It may be sought. How then is emptiness to be sought? Asked Manjushri, playing the role of the student. This is very humble of him. He is the bodhisattva of wisdom itself, and here he is taking a secondary role. This is very skillful of Manjushri. We don't ever think he really doesn't know, but he's doing this for the sake of others, so that all those hundreds of thousands of beings that have all fit into Vimalakirti's little tiny room, it's empty, so there's no distinctions. That is, no reason 100,000 can't fit when it's empty, even though it's a small room. He's doing it so that everyone there can see this Dharma dialogue and understand more deeply the nature of our reality. So it's very skillful and very compassionate behavior of Manjushri. He's not such a dolt. He's taking on a role in a very humble guise in order to turn the Dharma wheel. He's a true teacher. And this makes this dialogue even more extraordinary. How then is emptiness to be sought? Asked Manjushri. It may be sought in the 62 erroneous views of the non-Buddhists, was the reply. How are the 60 views to be sought? Asked Manjushri. They may be sought in the emancipation of the Buddhas, was the reply. And how is the emancipation of the Buddhas to be sought? Asked Manjushri. It may be sought in the minds and actions of all living beings, replied Manjushri. The emancipation of the Buddhas is not sought in the air. It's not sought in lofty doctrines. It's not sought in anything special at all. Vimalakirti says it is sought in the minds and actions of all living beings. That is, in exactly what is. The purposeful scurrying of an ant, the dance of the bee, the sound of the wind moving through the trees, the anger of a person shouting at their child in the parking lot at Wegmans. This is exactly where the emancipation of the Buddhas is to be sought, not other than our own lives and what we see, what we experience, and our own difficulties. This is where the emancipation of the Buddhas is to be sought. In our own self-doubt. This is where the emancipation of the Buddhas is to be sought. It's not a special thing, and yet it is special. And you ask why I'm without attendants? But in fact, the whole host of Maras and the non-Buddhist believers are all my attendants, says Vimalakirti. Why? Because the host of Maras delight in the realm of birth and death. And while the Bodhisattva is in the realm of birth and death, he does not scorn their company. The non-Buddhist believers delight in various views of reality. And the Bodhisattva knows how to remain unmoved by such views. That is, nice to hear them, interesting to entertain them, but we don't go there. We stay whatever our practice is. Everything is interesting. Everything is the truth if we remain deep in our own practice or shallow in our own practice, just with our own practice. Things come alive. Manjushri said, this illness of yours, layman, what form does it take? My illness has no form, replied Vimalakirti. It cannot be seen. Isn't that the truth? This illness of ours cannot be seen. I look at you, I see you. You look at me, you see me. I don't see your illness. You don't see my illness. But we're sick nonetheless. But bodhisattvas, even bodhisattvas have a sickness. The sickness of wanting to be of aid to all beings. Vimalakirti's sickness is quite a sickness. Manjushri said, is this illness seated in the body or in the mind? Yes, is our illness seated in the body or in the mind? Vimalakirti says, it's not seated in the body, for it is apart from bodily form. It's not seated in the mind. The mind is a phantom-like thing. Of the four major elements, earth, water, fire, and wind, to which of these elements does this illness pertain? Asked Manjushri. Vimalakirti said, this illness does not pertain to the element earth, but neither is it separated from the element earth, and the same may be said of the elements water, fire, and wind. Yet the illnesses of living beings arise from the four elements, and because living beings have these illnesses, therefore too I am ill. Then Manjushri asked Vimalakirti, how should a bodhisattva go about comforting and instructing another bodhisattva who is ill? Yeah, thanks. I can't do it and hold the book at the same time. Bravo. Vimalakirti replied to the question, how should a bodhisattva go about comforting another bodhisattva who is ill. Vimalakirti said, tell him about the impermanence of the body, but do not tell him to despise or turn away from the body. Tell him about the sufferings of the body, but do not tell him to strive for nirvana. That is to separate from what actually is, to think nirvana is separate from whatever we may be going through. Tell him that the body is without ego, but urge him to teach and guide living beings. That is, yes, vast emptiness is reality, but don't think that then you don't have to deal with the issues or help others because there's really no other. No, that would be a very wrong, very deep misunderstanding of the nature of Dharma. And of course, the great thing about Buddhist tradition is that it emphasizes not just wisdom, recognition of vast, empty reality, empty of all limitations, but compassion. That is, using that not to self-aggrandize, using that not to simply be a better tennis player, or skill in any area, which it will help to get out of the way in anything we're doing, but to use it to be of benefit to all is one of the main emphasis of Buddhist practice. There may be other ways to realize emptiness, but Buddhism insists on the responsibility to not separate oneself from the world and ordinary life. At least Zen Buddhism emphasizes that very strongly. Tell him of the emptiness of the body, but do not tell him of its final extinction. Well, the body's empty right now. You don't have to wait till it's extinguished, that is, till death, to discover that. Tell him to repent of former offenses, but do not tell him to consign them to the past. Right now is where we can work on the difficulties we created in the past. Right now, we can work on doing something about whatever harm we caused in the past. We can do it right now by seeing into it completely and finding out the one who did these things right now. That one is right here, right now. To see into the nature of our own selves, our own minds, our own bodies right now is to do the work for releasing those offenses. This would be true repentance as well. Tell him to repent, as I said, of former offenses, but don't tell him to consign them to the past. Tell him to use his own illness as a means of sympathizing with the illness of others, for he should understand their sufferings throughout the countless kalpas of their past existence, and should think, how can he bring benefit to all living beings? Maybe you've noticed this yourself. We think, oh, it's so terrible that so-and-so is sick. Oh, that's so terrible that so-and-so is having a hard time. But when we have something that really threatens, that really hurts, that really gives us a hard time, that maybe scares us with impermanence of our own selves, we might become much more empathetic, truly, not just kindly, but really empathetic to go, my gosh, this is universal. Everybody really experiences this. That means I do too. This is like the Buddha walking out the door, leaving home after seeing real impermanence, aging, sickness, death. It transformed him. It made him want to be of help to all beings. So our own illnesses, our own sickness, our own difficulties, our own pains can be grounds for maturing as human beings, really knowing a kind of depth of compassion we've never known before. So the Bodhisattva should use his own illness as a means of sympathizing with the illness of others. Tell him to recall the good fortune that he has won through religious practice, through his Zen practice, to concentrate on a life of purity and not to give way to gloom or worry. Not to give way to gloom or worry. We all have worries. We all have things that make us feel quite gloomy and down on ourselves. But don't give way to that. You can experience it. Realize that's the nature of life. We all have difficulties and we have moments where it seems very dark indeed. But don't give way to that. Keep going. Keep going. You should cultivate constant diligence, striving to become a king of physicians who can heal the ailments of all. This is how a bodhisattva should comfort and instruct a bodhisattva who is ill, so as to make him feel happy. Manjushri said, layman, how should a bodhisattva who is ill go about tempering and controlling his mind? Well, we're all ill. So he's saying, how should we practice if we're ill? To control our minds, to get rid of greed, anger, ignorance. Vimalakirti says, a bodhisattva who is ill should think to himself. Now, these illnesses of mine all spring from the deluded thoughts, the upside-down thinking, and various earthly desires of my past existence. They have no real existence, so who is it who suffers illness? Why? The four major elements come together, and therefore we apply a makeshift name, calling the thing a body. But the four major elements have no master, and the body has no I, or ego. And these illnesses, too, all arise from attachment to ego. Therefore, I should harbor no such attachment to ego. Doesn't mean don't have attachments to people or things that are important. It means we don't have to be so caught up in ourselves. Once one has understood the origin of illness as Vimalakirti, one may do away with the thought of an I or ego and the thought of other living beings. This is pure Mahayana, pure non-dual reality teaching. To do so, one should call up the thought of phenomena, thinking to oneself. It is simply that various phenomena have come together to form this body. It has appeared simply because phenomena appeared, and it will vanish simply because phenomena vanish. Isn't that the nature of reality? Impermanence is the nature of reality. And these phenomena are none of them known to one another. When they appear, they do not say, I have appeared. And when they vanish, they do not say, I have vanished. Then in order to transcend the thought of phenomena, that is, the thingness of the world, the ailing bodhisattva, which means all of us, we're all ailing bodhisattvas. We're ailing from sickness, aging, death. We're ailing from our own compassion, which wants us to be free of these things and be of use to others. We're all ailing bodhisattvas. This thought or concept of phenomena, too, is a form of upside-down thinking, and upside-down thinking can lead to great misfortune. I must rid myself of it. But how to rid myself of it? By ridding myself of thoughts of I and mine, which means ridding myself of dualism. Well, this is a sticky wicket. How can I rid myself of thoughts of my and mine, I and mine? Seems like adding another I to the whole problem. So we do it in Zen by this. We do it with or any koan point. We do it by just sitting fully present. That's how we stop adding I and mine to our own minds. What is meant by ridding oneself of dualism? It means not thinking of phenomena as internal or external, but treating all as equal. What is meant by equal? It means that I and nirvana are treated as equal. Why? Because I and nirvana are both empty. Why are they empty? Because they are mere names. Hence, empty. Neither of these two phenomena has any fixed nature or characteristics. And when one sits, one begins to realize this. This thing called me has really no fixed nature or characteristics. It changes all the time. And yet they're seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching, standing, sitting, driving, working. Once one has acquired this kind of equal outlook, one will be freed of all other illnesses and will have only the illness of emptiness. And the illness of emptiness, too, is empty. There are many koans that deal with the illness of emptiness. Oh, someone's realized it. There's nothing at all. And the teacher will respond, brandish your sword. Yamato Roshi used to say, even the empty sky must be beaten. We still have a concept of emptiness sticking in our minds, creating a separation, thinking, oh, now we're better than others, now we've got it. But emptiness is really empty, as Vimalakirti says. Stay with that. This ailing bodhisattva of ours has no sensations of pain or pleasure, and yet he allows himself to feel such sensations, and while the Dharma of the Buddha is incompletely practiced, he does not seek to wipe out such sensations in himself and gain entry into final enlightenment. Remember the Prajna Paramita, no pain or end of pain, not even wisdom to attain. This is the life of the bodhisattva. No pain or end of pain. If he feels pain in his body, he thinks of the living beings in the evil realms of existence and summons up a mind of great compassion, saying to himself, I have regulated and controlled myself, and now I must regulate and control other living beings. That is, help them. But he should also simply rid them of their illnesses and not deprive them of anything, merely teaching and guiding them so they can cut off the source of illness. Teaching and guiding in Zen doesn't mean giving anyone anything. Everyone already has everything. They just don't know it. So if anything, the job of a Zen teacher is to take away what we think we have so we can find out what we really have, what's been here all the time. This is teaching and guiding. It's not giving anybody anything. It's helping someone realize for themselves. What is meant by the source of illness? It means having troublesome entanglements. Where there are troublesome entanglements, these become the source of illness. What are these troublesome entanglements tied to? They are tied to the threefold world of past, present, future, form, formlessness, and desire. Threefold world. And how does one cut them off? By realizing, it seems so simple. Here's Vimalakirti with his sword. Manjushri with his sword talking to Vimalakirti. And Vimalakirti says, how does one cut them off? And here he gives the whole thing away. By realizing that there is nothing to grasp at. No self to maintain. No wisdom to gain. No answer to have. If one ceases to grasp at anything, doesn't mean not to live your life, not to care about things. Doesn't mean that at all. But if one ceases to grasp at anything, there'll be no more troublesome entanglements. We add the troublesome entanglements. We love our little dramas. We're hooked, addicts to our own dramas. If we let go of that, if we realize there's nothing that we can get from that, nothing that we can grasp at, nothing to hold on to, which can seem terrifying at times, we find that those entanglements, those troublesome entanglements, those repetitive patterns begin to untangle. Oh, what I was looking for was here all the time. What is meant by realizing that there is nothing to grasp at? It means having done with dualistic views. That is self-centered views. That is, I'm in here, you're out there, and your means everything is out there, and I'm in here. Eventually, that falls away too. That's a very ancient habit of mind. What is meant by dualistic views? It means viewing this as internal or viewing that as external. Having done with such views, there will be no more grasping at things. Why? Stephen Wright was a very dry comic from maybe the 80s, if you remember him. He said, I have a very vast seashell collection. I keep it spread out on beaches around the world. Having done with dualistic views, there'll be no more grasping at things. The world just as it is presents itself fully. I don't need to have all those shells locked up in my drawer, in my room. No, my vast collection is spread out on beaches around the world. Manjushri, this is how the ailing bodhisattva should go about regulating and controlling his mind. By doing so, he cuts off the sufferings of old age, sickness, and death. If he fails to do so, then all his religious practice and accomplishment in the past will be void of wisdom or profit. These are very strong words from Vimalakirti. He's saying, unless we can realize the nature of our minds, unless we really do this and have tiniest sense, and in some ways, just counting our breath from 1 to 10 is a realization of this. Even counting our breath to 1 is a realization of this. It's not something special. So don't think, oh, I don't know if I have that. No, you do. But if you think that religious practice and accomplishments are about adding pieces on and learning certain things and such, Vimalakirti calls that to question. He says all religious practice and accomplishment in the past will be void of wisdom or profit because it's not based on one's own personal experience. Those things, when we do experience some degree of presence, of non-dual presence, they all become means of expressing our nature, not gaining our nature. A person who has overcome a sworn enemy deserves to be called a hero. In the same way, one who is cut off, that has seen beyond birth, old age, sickness, death, may be called a bodhisattva. This ailing bodhisattva should also think to himself, this illness of mine has no reality, no existence, and the illnesses of other living beings likewise have no reality and no existence. When he adopts this view, if he should conceive a great compassion that is marked by affection and concern for living beings, he should thrust it aside. Why? Because the bodhisattva must rid himself of all earthly passions caused by external defilement. This is very, see if we can understand what he's saying here, because it sounds terrible. When he summons up his great compassion. If his compassion is marked by affection and concern, then he will have feelings of weariness and revulsion toward the realm of birth and death. But if he can put aside affection and concern, he will feel no weariness and revulsion. Whatever realm he happens to be born into, he'll not be blinded by affection or concern. So let's just comment on this for a moment. He's not talking about love. selfless love for all beings. He's not talking even about personal love for someone we're close with. He's talking about a kind of ego-derived attachment. In Christianity, there's medieval Christianity, which I studied as a lit major in one form or another, that underlies most of English lit. There are several levels of love. There's eros, absolutely selfless love is the point. The point is we're not attached to love. There's just loving. We gain nothing from it. My understanding of that passage is that's what Vimalakirti is talking about. Otherwise, we get entangled and we start, like many health-giving practitioners in therapeutic work, whether it's medical or psychological or sociological, can become exhausted, drained, damaged, get so caught up in the problems that we encounter in trying to be of help that we no longer really can help. We can't help ourselves. So it's not depersonalization or lack of feeling that Vimalakirti is talking about. He's talking about a kind of self-centered attachment that can arise in feeling and caring. And he's saying, no, it should be deeper than that. It should be truer than that, eternal, joyous, selfless, pure. Then we're never tired. We're never revulsed by the difficulties or any realm we may have to enter. We're free to do that. We don't judge it. We don't go, this is bad, this is good, this is attractive, this is unattractive. It's simply whatever is genuine and genuinely real and valuable and meaningful. So we'll stop after this next paragraph or so and finish this chapter. We're almost at the end of it, but we'll do it next time. He is not bound by the conditions of his birth, and hence he's able to preach the Dharma for living beings and liberate them from their bonds. If you remember the Jataka in which the Bodhisattva is the child of an ogre, we went into that a lot. He wasn't bound by the conditions of his birth. Each of us have indeed conditions of birth, upbringing, experiences, parental care or lack thereof. And yet, Bodhisattva, having touched base with the universal, human, vast empty ground of our nature, is able to present the Dharma, preach the Dharma, teach the Dharma, even as they are a conditioned being with a history and a past. We each have this potential. As the Buddha has said, if one is in bonds himself, to suppose he can free others from their bonds is hardly reasonable. And there certainly is a difficult issue in the nature of teaching Dharma itself. What is it that is required if one is going to help free others from their bonds? What is it that is really asked of us in being free of our bonds? What is the work that we each have to do? This is serious matters. If you look at what's been happening in the Buddhist world as it comes into the West, this issue arises again and again. Someone who seems to be able to open the Dharma to others and yet is not free of their bonds and causes terrible harm at the same time out of their own narcissism. We've seen this again and again, and it's in every tradition of practice, not just Zen, not just Tibetan Buddhism. Every tradition of practice, this is a danger we all need to be alert to. There has been discussion about this among Zen teachers. I was talking with Taigen Roshi recently. People would say, oh, but my teacher is so great. Of course, he's got these flaws, but his realization is so profound. And this went on, and a very noted elder American Zen teacher, this was all done through email, entered the conversation by saying, look, let's face it, if someone's realization was really deep, they wouldn't do these things. So come on now, let's be honest. Vimalakirti, 2,000 years ago almost, puts his finger on this issue. As the Buddha has said, if one is in bonds himself, to suppose he can free others from their bonds is hardly reasonable. But if one is himself free of bonds, doesn't mean perfectly free, it doesn't mean he's a Buddha. There's only one Buddha in our world age, but someone who is relatively, reasonably able to live by the precepts and has had some experience of something beyond body and mind. If one is then free of bonds, it is perfectly reasonable to assume he can free the bonds of others. Therefore, the Bodhisattva must not, get this, conjure up bonds for himself or herself. That's a wonderful conclusion to this little bit. The Bodhisattva must not conjure up bonds for himself or herself. There's no need to put ourselves in bondage. Just practice. Just do the best you can and see what's really going on. You don't have to pick up your pack of burdens every time and put it back on, is what Vimalakirti is saying. There's a wonderfully funny attitude under there. All the great sorrows. How much do we conjure up out of our own? Not to say things and painful things don't happen, but the way we take them. How much of that is due to our own habitual conditioning that we just haven't seen how to let go of yet? Finally, what is meant by bonds and what is meant by liberation? To become infatuated with the taste of meditation is the bondage of the Bodhisattva. It is to be attached to thinking that our practice is only about sitting, and somehow the more we sit, the better we'll get, is to be infatuated by the bondage or by the taste of meditation. This is a bondage for a bodhisattva. To be born in this world as a form of expedient means is the liberation of the bodhisattva. That is, we have to be engaged with things. We can't avoid it. We shouldn't shun that. Yes, the more we sit, the more helpful we're likely to be, but by the same token, we can't just build our practice around our own sitting and how it benefits us. And I've seen this, all of us have seen attitudes that we ourselves can get stuck in about how to think about our practice. Let's not. Let's remember there is a bodhisattva path articulated by Zen that we've chosen, not to just get caught up in an attachment to whatever comes to us through meditation and thinking meditation is the answer. It's part of the answer. But we have to live. We have to embody it. It has to function. To be born in this world as a form of expedient means is the liberation of the bodhisattva. Wisdom without expedient means is bondage. Insight, working on koans, whatever you want to call it, practicing deeply, counting 1 to 10, fully, whatever you want to call it, without expedient means is bondage. We're still stuck. Wisdom with expedient means is liberation. That is to have a functioning practice, one that is with us in our lives, in the difficulties, in the times of challenge, in the times of when it's all in our face, when there's a chance to do something and we do it, not go off and sit. Then this is liberation. It's functioning. And many of the koans, again, in our tradition, deal with having a functioning practice. It challenges us to do that, to step forward beyond our comfort zone. Expedient means without wisdom is bondage. Expedient means with wisdom is liberation. And we'll stop there and we'll recite our Bodhisattva vows joining with Vimalakirti and Manjushri, and take up the rest of this next week when we have our one-day session. So we'll stop here and recite the 4 vows.